Talking about vision, the Prime Minister had a vision of 70,000 housing units over about 5 or 6 years. And given what I've seen and meetings that I've sat in, I have no doubt that that vision will be achieved. Mr. Prime Minister does not need any introduction. So without any further ado, sir, I call you to the podium to give your address. Ladies and gentlemen, the Honorable Prime Minister of Jamaica, Mr. Andrew Holness.
Thank you, Courtney, for your mastery of the ceremonies. I believe we will have the presence of MP Robinson, possibly a little bit later from now. I do want him to be here because I have some messages that it's important that he hears them. But maybe after yesterday's delivery and Thursday's delivery last, he may not want to hear anymore. Let me acknowledge Mr. Barrington Hall and Mr. Linval Freeman and the managing partners of Comfort Apartments Development Limited and the other members of the board of this fantastic development. Let me acknowledge the acting chairman of the Jamaica Mortgage Bank, Mr. Ryan Parks. Let me acknowledge Mr. Damian Williams and Sudeen Hall for their prayers and the national anthem. Let me acknowledge the members of staff of the Jamaica Mortgage Bank. Representatives of the private sector who are here, representatives of the media. Ladies and gentlemen, it is truly a good morning. And it is indeed a pleasure for me to be with you this morning to participate in the ribbon cutting exercise for the vineyards at Deanery. Congratulations to all those who participated in making this project a reality from conception to construction. Those with the vision, as well as the architects, the engineers, the quantity and land surveyors. The quantity and land surveyors. No? Well, this is saying that I can't see my speech, so. So congratulations to all of you who have worked so very hard to get this project done. About 3 budget debates ago, I announced a program to regentrify areas like Vineyard Town. The program is still under development. Areas like Vineyard Town were developed from as early as in the 1940s. They were subdivided, they were housing estates, and the lots were built out over time. They were, during that period of time, considered as prime residential areas. Over time, these areas would have lost some of their premium value as housing estates. And I don't need to recount the reasons why this would have occurred. I'm certain that we all know. Nevertheless, these areas still have prime real estate value. They are on a grid. They have roads already developed. Many of them have sewer lines and significant water infrastructure already in place. The challenge, of course, is that when these lots were being developed, the concept of them being in an urban space was not thought of. They were considered to be suburbs of Kingston. But as the urban space of Kingston expanded,
0 hours, 3 minutes, and 10 seconds.
am I on a timer? But as the urban space of Kingston expanded, these lands would have, without formalization, changed the nature of their usage. And we see that happening with many formerly suburban communities around Kingston. And that has generated a kind of, I would want to describe it as an intense competition for the usage of land, which would sometimes create a challenge where the original covenants and usage ascription for the lands run into challenges as people try to change the usage without having regard to the process for which this should go through. Now, what that has done is to create a kind of haphazard development. And what we're finding is that a half-acre, a quarter-acre lot, which was what they were divided up in the 40s when these places were being developed as housing estate, we're now trying to increase the densities on these lots to accommodate the urban expansion of Kingston. I recently read an article that was reviewing my budget presentation, but had the commentary of the president of the Realtors Association. And in his commentary on the presentation, he said, what we offered in the budget was a good offer, but it won't move the needle. Because, yes, I see where, and I'm paraphrasing, I'm seeing where the government is trying to build low-income affordable housing, but the big question is where? And he went on to say, listing some communities that he was saying that people don't want to go and live that distance away from the urban space of Kingston where the employment and economic activity is. Essentially reinforcing the point about the urban economic center expanding to absorb the formerly defined suburban space around it. Now, what we see happening here is, if you put it into that context, is that this acreage has been repurposed to fulfill this almost natural progression of the urban space absorbing what was formerly a suburban space and increasing the density on the land. I wanted to just set this context for my presentation. We have to kind of revision Kingston. We're not going to be able to avoid it. But the revisioning has to be done in an orderly way. It has to be done in a thoughtful way. And it has to be done, as you have said, Mr. Hall, with a vision. there has to be a vision. What is it that we want for our city? Not just the city of Kingston, but for any of our natural or built urban spaces. And I think we could start by highlighting some elements. First of all, I think we want convenience. Everybody wants to be close to work, close to entertainment, and they want to be close to amenities, hospitals, gyms, and so forth. Then I would say that everybody wants to have reliable infrastructure: roads, water, sewage, public transportation, garbage collection, those things that make modern living comfortable. And then, particularly for urban spaces, our architecture must reflect a sense of who we are, some form of modernity, but it must also be aspirational. Our architecture must reflect what we aspire to be. So it can't be just poorly designed, shabbily constructed buildings that are, just put together to extract a profit. And then 5 years later, the paint has faded and stripped. The building is cracking. The people who occupy it are uncomfortable because there was no thought about ventilation, how garbage will be disposed, these kinds of things. So I think I'm highlighting 3 elements of the vision of what we would want the developments of our city to be. So when I developed this program to start the regentrification of areas like Vineyard Town, the government went about doing a survey of all the lots that are available in the area. And then we did a survey of the occupancy of the area. What percentage of the area is rented? How many homes are actually owner-occupied? The state of the public infrastructure. So all of that work is being done. And in fact, we have completed some areas, and we already know what the socioeconomic profile of the area is. Then we have to devise a strategy of getting critical mass of land in the area. What has been happening so far is that we have individual initiative. So we have a developer who has a connection with somebody who owns land, and they go and they strike a deal, probably a land development deal, to develop half acre here. And then a few blocks over, somebody decides, you know what, I'm getting older, I'd love to move into a smaller apartment, I'm going to sell my lot. And so what you find is that the development is happening in a haphazard way. So roads are being destroyed, people are being inconvenienced by all kinds of trucks parking and cement and concrete dropping on their roads. And it's happening in a very haphazard way. Maybe over 20, 30 years, the entire community will be reconstructed. But for those people who have to live through those 2 or 3 decades of regentrification, it is going to be very inconvenient, very contentious, and I'm certain there will be a lot of court cases. So the government is looking at this situation. We don't want to in any way dampen the private initiative and energy in the real estate market, because that's very important to the growth of the economy. But it has to become coordinated and better organized. Now, we don't live in a dictatorship. So the government can't just call everybody together and say, okay, we are only developing this road and every other road holds until we are finished here. Because everybody has their rights. If someone wants to sell their land for it to be developed, you know, why should the government go and prevent that? But government does have the authority to make policy that can influence free will and choice. So government has tax policy, for example, how it gives incentives. Government can dictate where it is going to put in the infrastructure, because that is a big draw. Where infrastructure exists, the capital will move there. And government can determine the development order. And so we're taking all of these elements together to, one, make determinations as to where we're going to channel public investment in infrastructure. We're looking at how that can be matched to the socio-economic profile of this community. And then government will engage the owners of property here to give good incentives to see how we could acquire property that are contiguous so that we create a critical mass so that we can have higher densities without compromising, one, the sustainability and the protection of the environment, but increased convenience. So a development like this, I gather, there is a pool house and other amenities. But can you imagine if we were to be doing developments like this, one beside another, and then the cost of putting in those amenities increases the individual cost of each unit. When if you were doing a much larger development, the infrastructure costs and the amenity costs relative to the cost of a single unit would drop tremendously, which would then make the price point more affordable. And this is what we're doing in the Ministry of Housing. Government also has some legislative authority under the Housing Act. It can declare some areas as areas under the Housing Act. And it also has the powers of acquisition. Notice I did not use the other term because that generates all kinds of arguments. But government can acquire in the public interest. Let me phrase it in that way. And so we're looking at all of those policy tools that we have to put them in a comprehensive policy. And maybe not this budget, maybe, well, this budget is gone. Maybe next budget we will come to you and explain the government's strategy in the regentrification of these areas. But I think we can safely say that we are seeing private initiative taking hold with this policy. Because it's not just here that we're seeing interest in communities like Vineyard Town. Just across from Raytown a couple months ago, I opened another development in East Kingston. Lovely facility, similar to this. And I'm certain, well, I happen to know that there are other developments planned and they're going through the approval process. So even just by the government saying we're focusing on these areas would have triggered private sector investors to say it is safe to make investments in this area. The next step for the government now is to put in place and effect a comprehensive policy framework to harness this naturally existing entrepreneurial spirit for housing estate development. And I think when we get to that point, you will then see another headline from the president of the Realtor Association saying, yes, the government policy is sufficient and it is moving the needle. But having said that, I don't agree that the needle is not being moved. We have invested heavily in providing an infrastructure to support housing developments in Jamaica. Firstly, let me start with the new social housing program. Whenever government goes to make policy, we must ensure that there is equity. In fact, that's the whole business of government, to make sure that everyone benefits. I use a simple marker that government should make policy that no one is made worse off and at least one person is made better off. And I believe that what we have done in housing, we have made many persons better off and no one worse off. That benchmark is applied in the first instance to the new social housing program. Now, as a country, we do have a social conscience. And that social conscience is that everyone in Jamaica should have a minimum standard, a basic standard of shelter. I think we can all agree. But as we go across our country, we do see that there are persons who are living in extremely substandard facilities. In fact, the purpose of us doing the census is to identify what the existing standard of housing is in Jamaica. The census is not yet complete. There are many other countries that are having the same problems as we have had. The pandemic has changed the way in which people participate in these important national exercises. In one country, I saw a news report where they shut down the country for a day or two, and everyone has to go and participate in the national census. Of course, Jamaica could not do that. I believe it was Bolivia, if my memory serves me right. But it will be interesting for Jamaicans to go and look at and see what other countries have done just to try and ensure that they get this critical national information. We don't have a current census as to housing standards in Jamaica, but we do have some metrics that we use. For example, the number of applications that members of parliament get for social housing. And we estimate that there are about 6,000 Jamaicans who live in the absolute worst conditions. And when I say worst condition, bear with me when I say that we have people living in abandoned cars. I have seen several cases where a family of 3 was living in a small tool shed, you could call it, 8 by 10, no windows. I can say this because I spoke to the mother who gave me permission to tell her story over and over. Her son was stung by a scorpion, and he was paralyzed for a few days and could not speak. There are some really bad situations. So government, in looking to building housing, can't just focus on lovely apartments like these. We also have to build solutions for the most vulnerable, very poor. So we've developed a program called the New Social Housing Program, and essentially the main qualification is that you have no income. In other words, you would not be able to participate, or you are not participating in the housing market. So you have no effective demand. You would be considered poor, and you have no prospects of income, and your household is not able to help. And so we target those persons. So I would say that our housing policy is very considerate, and it is very socially oriented with the new social housing program. And so far we have gone 213 units. We have 53 under construction, and we have a sizable budget this year where we have about $500 million plus another $500 million from the Tourism Enhancement Fund, where we're going to focus now on building, continuing our social housing program, but we're going to build in the tourism areas, because there are many persons working in the tourism industry who, if you know the history of that, they migrated from other areas in Jamaica. No housing was there for them, so they end up just living in informal settlements. But yet they work in some of the most fabulous and salubrious circumstances. But they go home to nothing. So we're going to focus on that. So that element of the policy is not usually focused on, but I want to assure Jamaica that we are focusing on building housing for the poor. And these houses are given at no cost. At no cost. Well, it is at no cost to the beneficiary, but it does cost the taxpayers of the country. But it is part of our social conscience. The next element of the policy is to support the development of affordable housing. And the affordable housing, we are now looking at income brackets. So we want housing for low income, and we want housing for middle to lower middle income. And that is where the effort of the NHT is. In fact, we have given a policy directive to the NHT that all their developments must be focused on the affordable housing sector, meaning middle, lower middle, and low income. Now, that doesn't mean that the NHT will not participate in higher end developments, because the truth is that the contributors are representative across all income levels of Jamaica. You do have higher income people paying their NHT, and they have a claim on the NHT's policy direction. The strategy is, however, that where these housing developments that are higher income can be executed by the private sector, then we go in a partnership with the private sector. So if we have the land and the private sector wants to develop it, we make the land available, the private sector develops that, and that's how the NHT facilitates on that end. But all our resources now in the NHT, and I want to make that absolutely clear, that the government of Jamaica 3 years ago gave a directive to the board of the NHT that all their policy efforts must be focused on the delivery of affordable housing solutions. And we do that through the developers program, which is ongoing. We do that through the guaranteed purchase program, where the NHT will undertake to purchase homes at a particular price point, and that removes the risk to the developer for producing these homes, knowing that he will not have a market risk. He will not have houses that will not be sold. And so that program is going very well. The objective is that the NHT will bring to market 43,000 housing solutions within the next couple of years. In fact, it is already happening, and every year we bring to market a few thousand houses. But in the next couple of years, the pace of delivery of that will increase. Now, we have had problems, and sometimes when these things get into the public domain, the public isn't given the full understanding. So we have had challenges where the NHT would have entered into agreement to purchase units at the price point which is considered affordable. And having supported the developers to start construction, start development, even completing units, the developers turn around and see that the unit that we agreed to pay $13 million for can be sold for 25. And then all of a sudden, the units that we are supposed to get, and I'm not using actual figures now, I'm being anecdotal. Well, maybe more practical. So units that we agree to purchase at, let's say, 13 or even 15, by the time these units come to market, a year and a half, 2 years hence, the market value and what people, higher income persons, are willing to pay for them, the developer is saying, you know, maybe I could get a better price, so I won't even bother give the NHT these units, because I can get a better price for it on the open market. And so we have faced these challenges before, and you would have seen back and forth in the media, not understanding why these things happen. It's not because of any negligence on the part of the NHT, but, you know, so it is when people see that they can earn a bigger profit, they will, you know, they will pay the cost of prosecution. Put it that way, because they will earn far more in profit. So those programs are going on, and we are delivering housing to the population as quickly as we can. But I do take the point that was made earlier. We have to move much faster than we are doing. The bureaucracy, the red tape, it is stifling. It is stifling. But Jamaica is going through a phase in its development. You know, 20 years ago, procurement was not a big issue. 20 years ago, public investment assessment didn't even exist. 20 years ago, you know, we did not have a very active committee system of parliament. We had maybe one, which was the PAC, but now we have the Public Appropriations and Accountability Committee, which is a part of the oversight of government, part of the accountability and probity. So we have had it on layers of bureaucracy to increase transparency and probity. The cost of that is efficiency. So the trade-off, it can't be a trade-off really, because you can't trade off efficiency for accountability. Because the truth is, once you lose accountability and probity, you're going to become inefficient. So where are we now? We are at the point where we have to get our public sector, this broad, you know, amorphous description, public sector, to be more efficient. But the public sector is not made up of block and steel. The public sector is made up of people. We have to get our people more efficient. Let me put this another way. We have to get our workers more efficient. Part of my presentation in Parliament was about how do we increase productivity. And productivity is a complex issue. Part of it is motivation, and a part of motivation is pay. But a part of productivity is management. And the culture of managing our resources for efficient delivery is not a culture that is deeply entrenched in our public service. And the government has put in place the compensation review program, which so far the understanding of it is that it is about increasing pay levels. That is so. And I think we have largely accomplished that, except for anomalies that need to be worked through. The next phase of the compensation review is the performance and accountability systems. If we are to maintain these layers of accountability, which you, the public, have asked for, and increase efficiency, which you, the public, are also asking for, then the only way to get both is by performance management. We have to set goals, and we have to keep to those goals. We have to set systems of rewarding people who use initiative and who deliver. That is not a concept that is necessarily rooted in the public service. Because the public service is, we work to rule. We don't take risk, and we are not rewarded for risk or performance. If this project gets built on time, I get the same pay as if it didn't get built on time. So my job, as uncomfortable as it is and as unfavorable as it sounds, is that if Jamaica is going to move forward to achieve the vision that all of us want, and all of us want to participate in it, then the next phase of this compensation review has to be executed. And it is for all of us here who work in the public sector, we have to recognize our important role in embracing performance management. So we are going to move towards that, and we're going to ensure that Jamaica becomes the productive country that we know it can be. I see the Member of Parliament for the area, so he missed all of the comment. Please join us. I apologize on your behalf, but you missed all the important things. I'm going to set Nigel on you. But we do make the commitment that the government has to focus on the issue of productivity. Productivity is the only way that we, aside from government policy in terms of its fiscal and monetary policy, but we now have to focus on the microeconomics of growth, which is how do we get increased productivity. And the only way, I say to public sector workers, I say it again, the only way to protect against inflation is to increase output, to increase productivity. So it is in the interest of workers to increase productivity. Just to close my presentation, you've been a wonderful audience. The NHD has also been given a policy directive to ensure that more of their housing solutions are targeted to young people. When we were debating what is young, I was saying, 29. But I'm told that the universal definition of young, no, it's not 60. It's 39. That's my understanding. So we are focusing 10% of our housing solutions for young people, 39 and younger. So, I apologize to to most of us under this tent. But it's important that we give our young people an opportunity. And we have developed a program where we will allow young persons who are buying their homes for the first time to buy a starter home, essentially. And then, but those homes are predetermined. And then when they would have, so let's say they bought a studio. That's sufficient for their present lifestyle. They go to work, they eat at restaurants, they go to parties, they go to laundromats. But as they grow older, and it's now 2 instead of 1, and within a year or 2 it's 3 instead of 1, then certainly a studio is not sufficient. So we will allow them to sell that studio to the NHD. The NHD will buy that. But they would not lose their housing benefit. So they would be able now to get their, if they are a couple, their 7.5, so they would get their $13 million. $15 million. And go and buy another home. So that is, in my mind, a significant incentive for young people to make purchases. So instead of paying towards rent, you pay towards a mortgage, knowing that you can get a second mortgage essentially from the NHT. But it is an incredible business opportunity for developers to look for land in proximity to urban spaces where there's significant employment of young people, to develop these, we call them starter homes, for young people to be able to purchase. So in effect, we have used policy to create a market opportunity. And I'm certain that we're going to see more developers doing this because it is a very profitable way to deploy capital in real estate. So, ladies and gentlemen, with those few comments, you have been a wonderful audience, and I thank you. And again, I commend the developers, Comfort Apartments developers, for this wonderful facility in Vineyard Town.
Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. My takeaway is it doesn't make sense trading off accountability for efficiency. And you spoke about a solution, which is the next step in the compensation transformation. But I have another solution, and that is to channel a lot of the developments, government developments, through the Jamaica Mortgage Bank. Right, guys? We boast of being one of the most efficient government agency in Jamaica. And I would have anybody challenge that. So let me just take the time out to welcome a few persons that came in after. Our directors, Doreen Prendergast, who is also the Managing Director for the Housing Agency of Jamaica. Carrie Douglas, who is also a director at the Jamaica Mortgage Bank, and Mrs. Patricia Henry as well. Welcome. Also welcome to the Member of Parliament for Eastern St. Andrew, Southern Eastern St. Andrew. I get tongue-tied with these things. I'm not sure, would you like to say a word or bring greetings?
Thank you. Morning, ladies and gentlemen, Prime Minister and other distinguished guests. I had indicated to the organizers today is the funeral for the mother of the town clerk for the KCC, which started at 10, Robert Hill. So I was there, I left. The council for the Vineyard Town Division and the mayor is currently there. That is why he's not here. So I'd extended an apology. This is a welcome development for Vineyard Town. Vineyard Town is going through a transformation, and I would regard it as one of the hot in-demand areas. Hot in demand because of the proximity, whether you work uptown, midtown, or downtown, is very central, and because the homes are large lot sizes. But we have to balance the need for units like this with the need for affordable housing, and for persons who would not be able to afford this. And NHT is doing another development on 3rd Avenue, 2 units. They were stalled, but they are continuing, about, I think, 20-odd units, apartments there. And so there is an opportunity within this area for what I would call a mix of, I would regard this as middle going up, but also there's a need for the opportunity for middle going down so that we can balance it, because the developers are in demand in here, and that pushes up the price of land in the area. So while we welcome this, and it's a good thing, we, Prime Minister, have to find a way to ensure that the persons at the lower end, and I call the lower end, units that can be delivered, starting with a 1-bedroom of below $10 million, so people can build on it, that we produce more of those. So He did. Okay, I didn't hear. Okay. I listened attentively in his budget presentation, but I didn't hear. So he was unable to finish. So commendations to the mortgage bank and the developers on this. It's, as I said, a good addition to Vineyard Town. I think it will trigger other developments because you have to support housing, whether there be supermarkets, other forms of entertainment, because people will want to be in close proximity to their homes. So we look forward to that. And again, we will monitor and see how we can ensure that the community develops in an orderly way and one in which all the participants can have a home within this area. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Robinson. Yeah, you missed 3/4 of the Prime Minister's presentation. So I was a little remiss in bringing up, we have a little entertainment for you. I'm having a little difficulty with this word, but there's a dance presentation by the Ecclesia Bible Fellowship. Are they here and ready? Let's give them a round of applause. And right after that, we will have the vote of thanks by Mr. Lyndon Freeman, who is also a director of the Comfort Apartments Development Company.
commence. The Most Honorable Andrew Holness, Prime Minister and Minister of Economic Growth and Job Creation, MP Julian Robinson. I have greetings for the Mayor, but he is unavoidably absent. Directors of Comfort, MC and Managing Director of the Jamaica Mortgage Bank, other directors of Jamaica Mortgage Bank, ladies and gentlemen. 5 years is quite a long time by any measure. And so that is roughly the time that it took us from the concept stage to the completion stage. And they have a common saying that anything you do, and if you do it for less than 5 years, you really haven't done it. Marriage is just one of those as well. So, you know, you have to stay married for at least 5 years. And so in everything we give thanks anyway. So I give thanks to the Almighty God for smiling on us and taking us through this journey. I wish to thank you, Honorable Prime Minister, for taking the time out to be here. I know of your passion when it comes to affordable housing, and I was about to say something about the NHT, but you know I'm conflicted, so I'll leave that alone, right? And also, I thank you, MP, to be here, and I'm hoping that this 96 units that we have put up here is the start, as the Prime Minister says, of the re-gentrification of the Vineyard Town area. I wish to thank as well the Jamaica Mortgage Bank. You know, when we approached the Jamaica Mortgage Bank, we describe ourselves as neophytes, really. Didn't know much about development. I being a chartered accountant and my brother-in-law, Junior, being a minister of religion. But I think the Mortgage Bank saw something in us, whether it was our credibility that we came with, or you know, some other thing that they saw. And so they took a chance with us, and we are very, very grateful for that and for the experience with them. We thank all the people who took us along the journey. So we started 5 to 6 years ago with the concept, and I wish to express thanks to USCOT and ASCO, who basically took us through the concept stage, got us connected with the approval process and various professionals, some of the various professionals who we worked with to the end of the project. To our legal advisors, Patterson Mayor Hamilton, and in particular to Linda Mayer, who is sitting at the back here. And Linda, you remind me of my school teacher. And I, as a good student, actually take wise counsel from you throughout the process. I thank Janju, led by Jack and his team, Jack. Jack is sitting right there. And Jack was really a facilitator. As many of you know, when you're doing a project from scratch, you have to sell a certain amount of units before you can draw down on your financing. In this case, we had to sell 35 units before we could draw down on the financing. And Jack and his team was so good to us, they actually took the building out of the ground so that the purchasers and all those could come and see that something was happening, and it was just not merely empty land. And Jack, we are ever grateful for that, for your input there. We should thank all our professional advisors who worked with us. Owen Grant, who was our QS and project manager. Rivi Gardner, I don't see Rivi around, but Rivi was our architect. Rivi is somewhere over there, our architect. Yes, Rivi, I see you now. We thank Donovan Simpson, who is our land surveyor. Mr. Carl Chin, civil engineer. Leighton Facey, our MEP engineer. And we also thank our various suppliers who were very kind to us, those who supplied pool equipment, the gate equipment, the elevators, among others, the signages, etc., etc. To our realtors, we started with Barry Levy and Associates, and they were able to get us across the line. and allowed us to qualify for the drawdown with the Jamaica Mortgage Bank, and we are eternally grateful. And we are also grateful to Caldwell Bankers, who is taking us to the finishing line. I would also like to thank the regulatory agency, and my brother Junior spoke about the delays that we experienced with some of them. I'd just like to mention the NEPA, though, and Gregory, and Mr. Gregory Bennett from NEPA. I don't know if Gregory is here, but Gregory was the one who kind of indicated to us after we started that there was a new development order for Vineyard Town, and was able to facilitate us, you know, and the ability for us to put up an additional floor, given the change in the development order. And so we were able to build, because we initially started with 80 units, and we were able to build an additional 16 units after we found out that the development order had changed. And so we're very grateful to Gregory for this. To the purchasers who took a gamble with us, I was just indicating to the PM that we started initially selling the studios for 16 million and the 2 bedrooms for 25 million. So all the purchasers who took a gamble with us in the initial stages, if you had bought 10 units, you'd have made north of 50 million based on the current price. But we are grateful for those who came in and was able to help us to meet the target of 31, so we could draw down on our financing to get the project going. June, I'd like to thank Ecclesia and the dancers, and you know all the persons who gave prayers from Ecclesia. And of course, I'd like to thank everyone for coming. I mean, we always say there is no free lunch, you know, in whatever we do. And so the invitation for all of you sitting here, see my friend Eddie and Stephen and Don and everybody here, is really to get you interested in buying one of the apartments. We have about 20 left, right, of the 96, and we need to get rid of those. So once we're finished here, you just take a look around and become interested. Finally, thanks again, everyone. I pray God blessings on everyone, and I wish you, you know, all the best for the remainder of the day and safe passage home. Okay? All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Linval. Let me just also welcome CTD, Ms. Scarlett. Welcome. We will now have the ribbon cutting with the Prime Minister, the Board of Directors of the JMB, the Board of Comfort, and I'm not sure where that's going to be. And then afterwards, we will do a little tour of the building with whoever would like to, especially if you're interested in buying a unit. Again, we would like to thank you very much for coming and taking up our invitation. And we have 11 more of these to do within the next 6 months. So thank you again for coming. Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister, for coming.
All right, after three. The pressure downward, right? So that as I cut, it will just naturally fall. So after 1 million, 1 million. Thanks everyone.